Good morning. This is the Friday devotional on our Week of the Cross from our book that we're doing, Lent in Plain Sight by Jill Duffield. Today's is called Carrying Jesus' Cross, and the scripture is Mark 15, verses 16 through 24. Then the soldiers led Jesus into the courtyard of the palace, that is the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole cohort, and they clothed him in a purple cloak, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on him. And they began saluting him, "Hail, King of the Jews." They struck his head with a reed, spat upon him, and knelt down in homage to him. After mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. They compelled a passerby who was coming in from the country to carry his cross. It was Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. Then they brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of a skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him and divided his clothes among them, casting lots to decide what each should take. Imagine for a minute that you're Simon of Cyrene. You're walking down the street, heading into Jerusalem, on your way for the festivals, for business, for whatever it was. You're just walking along, minding your own business, when you see some Roman soldiers up ahead. Now you know that that's trouble. You want to stay as far away from them as you can. And as they're coming towards you, you notice that they're forcing a very bruised, very bloodied man down the road. He's wearing a crown of thorns. He's fallen onto the ground from the weight of the cross that they're making him carry with him. What do? Now, the disciples have all fled by this point. There's only the crowd jeering and yelling and throwing things. The question I want to ask you is, could Simon have refused? Could he have refused to do what the Roman soldiers asked him? Probably not. If the Roman soldiers ordered him to do it, then he really didn't have a choice. So the act that he did, was it an act of compassion to take up Jesus' cross for him? Or was it an act of complicity? 3 of the 4 Gospels record this happening in Simon's name. Either way, whether it was from compassion or complicity, Simon's now part of God's salvation story. And here in Mark, which is probably our earliest gospel, talks about Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus, which means his sons were somehow known to this community of believers, because why else would you mention them? So it must be that Alexander and Rufus were somehow around and well known to people for whatever reason. So this is a point where people are like, Rufus, the guy, that you see all the time. Yeah, him, his father, he was the one. So it's one of those moments. It's one of those, what I joke, this is like so Iowa right here. Here we are in the middle of the crucifixion. The guy that we all knew that used to work at, yeah, it's one of those moments where we all try to figure out how we're all connected. Even in the middle of the crucifixion, we're still trying to figure out the connection with people that we know. And here's Simon, a man who wanted nothing to do with any of this, dragged in and forced to become part of this story. God's will to save the entire world cannot be denied, even when all the usual suspects that he could have tapped, Peter, James, John, and they've all left. They've all run and fled and scattered to the hills. Even those compelled to service, like Simon, completely oblivious to the role that they're playing. He would have had probably very little idea of what he was being forced to do. Even those people are still furthering the will of God, even though they don't know it. Simon is a great example of God embodying the ability to use any of us in spite of our ignorance, in spite of our fear, in spite of our reluctance, to use any of us to be able to further God's own will. I mean, some days our faith compels us to follow Jesus anywhere. I mean, some days we are so on board and our faith is strong and we're ready to go and let's do this, Jesus. I am behind you. And then there's other days where we try to run away and deny we ever knew Jesus and try to pretend that we aren't going to be the ones to take up the cross and follow, that we're just doing our thing and blended into the background, and I don't need to get tapped today. Simon reminds us that the cross of Christ will be borne by somebody, and the world will be redeemed by the one we try to follow, the one that we too often deny, and the one that we should always seek to worship. And I really like the way she put that. The one we try to follow, too often deny, and always seek to worship. Because I think that sums us up quite well. That we try to follow, knowing that we will not always get it right, and that we too often deny. I know I do. I joke all the time about whether I should I wear a clerical collar or not when I go to the airport? Because about half the people want to run away from me when they see that because they don't want to be anywhere near a pastor. And the other half decide that they're drawn to me and must tell me everything they've ever done. Whether I want to know it or not, they feel a need to tell me. So the question always is, so do I just hide who I am or try to deny who I am? I have been guilty in the past of, I'm flying somewhere for personal reasons, family stuff going on. And I have been known to say that I work for a nonprofit just because I don't want to deal with it. I can't deal with one more person today. But that should be the day that I willingly say that, yes, I am a pastor. Yes, I am a follower of Christ. Yes, I am all those things. And I don't always. And I'm sure the rest of you have days like that too, where sometimes it's just easier to just let it go and not create the waves. But we're supposed to. We're supposed to. And this is a reminder that God can use any of us in spite of ourselves at any time, in spite of our ignorance, in spite of our reluctance, in spite of our fear, in spite of our stubbornness, in spite of our wanting to always be right. God will still use us anyway. So here's a couple of questions. So imagine yourself as Simon of Cyrene. What are you thinking and feeling? How does the experience of carrying Jesus's cross change you? In your own faith story, have there been times you willingly took up the cross? Times you were compelled to do so? Could Simon have refused Jesus's cross? What difference does it make if he did or didn't have a choice? And I think this one, could he have refused? I don't know that he could. The political situation being what it was and Roman soldiers being who they were, I don't know that he could have. He may have had no other choice. That's usually how he's depicted, is that he had no option. He had to do this. But does it make a difference if he did or didn't have a choice when this happened? So those are just some things to think about. I hope this reading has been helpful. I hope these devotionals have been helpful. And I will see you again real soon. Bye-bye.